Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 46, and this is a special one. This is requested by our patron, longtime friend of the show, and a longtime friend of ours individually, Brian, who requested a special episode on the relationship between Charles Xavier and Max Eisenhardt / Eric Lenscher / Magnus / Magneto.
That's pretty awesome. I like the idea that we're starting to branch out in terms of how we're going to structure episodes, so it stays fresh for everyone. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, this one is going to be tailored ever so slightly differently. The background is going to be much shorter because obviously, since we're talking about the relationship between two characters, we're not going to go full bore into each character's individual background, but rather their shared, I guess, instances or shared events, shared history, really. So on a side note, before we get started, I just want to say that we have officially passed the $50 goal for our patrons. So Thank you so much, each and every one of you, whether you're a subscriber at the $1, $3, $5, or $10 level. We are absolutely blown away. I mean, we've been doing this for a little over a year. And when we started, it was really just a matter of, well, let's see if we can get some people to listen. And the fact that we have so many folks who want to financially contribute to better this show means a great deal to us. So unfortunately, we're not live streaming this session because by the time we realized everything, it was a little late to put that together. But all of our future sessions will be live streamed. And I know, Doc, you had referenced that a little bit last week, that you'd be opening up your anonymity just a titch more. So you'll actually get to see Doc and I physically interact and watch us as we record this show and all of our future episodes. And we're very much looking forward to that. So if you want to get in and you want to see some live streaming for the future, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/capesonthecouch. And you can subscribe at the $1, $3, and $5 levels because our $10 level is maxed out.
That's right. And the best part for me is I get to get rid of all the stereotypes. So no, you're not going to see me in a white coat. No, you're not going to see me in a 3-piece multi-$1,000 suit. No, I don't role play for any of this, and neither does Anthony. So we're just two regular guys that are talking about the thing that we really love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And a side note, before we get started into the actual episode, I just want to plug a quick appearance that will be coming out actually by the time this episode is released. The episode that I guested on should be out. I did a guest spot with our friends at Popcorn Psychology to talk about The Empire Strikes Back. So that episode came out, I believe, this past Monday. So you can follow them at popcorn_psych on Twitter and Popcorn Psychology on Instagram. And that episode is amazing because The Empire Strikes Back is my favorite film of all time. And then I'm also recording, actually tomorrow, I will be recording a guest spot for Into the Night, the Moon Knight themed podcast. That is a guest appearance that I'll be doing as part of their 100th episode. And we'll be interviewing a special guest star, but I'm not going to reveal any of that because since Ray hasn't said anything, I don't want to be the one to spoil the surprise, but I am very, very excited about being a part of the interview with this particular guest star. Ray reached out to me because he knew how much this guest star's work on Moon Knight meant to me personally. So he said, would you be interested in joining me for this interview that I'm doing with, spoiler alert, I am super, super geeked to be part of that. So check that out, Into the Night, KNIGHT. And Doc, anything else you want to add before we get started?
Let's see. You thanked all the people that are making this even better than before. You plugged things that you're directly involved in. I just want to make sure that people know we do care so much that at some point we want to reward them with things that they can show their love with. Merchandising!
Yes, listen to Yogurt. We will, now that we've reached the $50 goal on our Patreon, we will be next introducing some merchandise, swag, shirts, pins, stickers, magnets, cups. We're not exactly sure what form it's going to take, but we are going to slap that Capes on the Couch logo on stuff, and we are going to monetize it because capitalism. But also to give you, our incredible fans and listeners and supporters, an opportunity to show how much you appreciate and love the show. And then that will give other folks an opportunity to say, hey, what is that? With this? Well, this is just my nifty Capes on the Couch mug. This shirt? Oh, this is a moisture wicking dry fit Capes on the Couch shirt. Oh, this sticker? This is a bulletproof Kevlar vest made out of the hopes and dreams of psychiatrists. I don't know. I'm just rambling here.
But now you're taking it too far, except I would wear that vest.
I'm sure you would.
Yep.
So, now that we've completely derailed the episode, I apologize. It's a little wonky. I had a long day with my son. He's adorable. He's absolutely adorable. And thank you, by the way, to everybody who contacted me to say how much they appreciated hearing Theo on last week's episode and throughout last week's episode. Because if you really listen closely, you can hear him crying in the background. So we'll see if that continues. My wife, God bless her, is taking care of him in the living room while we are squirreled away in my office recording. But enough chit chat. Oh, there he goes. There he goes. We can hear him. I don't know if you can hear him. But in any case, this episode, Brian requested the relationship between Charles Xavier and Magneto. Now, as I said, we're not going to get too into the weeds on this because it is a shared episode. And also because, frankly, we're assuming through the zeitgeist, most people are familiar with at least who Charles Xavier and Magneto are. So we're not going to get too into the weeds. But obviously, they were introduced as mortal enemies in X-Men #1, September 1963. Xavier was the head of the Xavier Institute for Gifted Youngsters, while Magneto was the mutant extremist who was trying to eradicate or subjugate mankind. And it was later revealed that they were actually old friends, and they used to work together to help Holocaust victims in Israel. And neither knew the other was a mutant initially, but then they learned of their powers and ended up parting ways because they realized that their views were incompatible with each other, because Xavier was of the mindset that humans and mutants could work together and live together in peace. And Magneto, being a Holocaust survivor, saw the horrors that mankind inflicted upon those that it deemed less than or unworthy or subhuman, and really did not feel the warm, fuzzy feelings. Totally understandably, by the way. I just want to throw that out there. And it's a credit to the writers that Magneto's distrust of mankind has always been rooted in his experiences, which are very justifiable. So right. I don't want anyone misleading that also, oh, you're going, no. He has every reason to distrust people. Just putting that out there.
Yep. I'm so glad that they came to that resolution and nothing happened past that point.
Yeah. So after decades of villainy, Magneto began to change his mind on humankind, and eventually he turned himself in to be judged for his crimes. We're not going to get into the whole, he was actually de-aged and then re-aged back to an adult. That's a whole other ball of wax because comics. So a dying Xavier asked Magneto to watch over the school, which he does for a time. So Magneto ends up becoming the new headmaster of the school, and he is responsible for training the new mutants, which he does so in a very efficient and, I don't want to say cold, but sort of a distant fashion, because he's not Xavier. He's not there to teach the children how to become better people and he wants them to be ruthless, efficient. You are going to master your skills. You are going to learn, and you are not here to have fun. You are here to learn what I teach you. And if you don't get the lessons, I'm going to drill it in your head. So there's certainly a clash of styles from Charles Xavier to Magneto.
Hey, we've all had different kinds of teachers, right? You know, some that have an incredible, rigid system that must be followed if you want the good grades, and others that are very go with the flow, almost friends with kids, and sometimes too friendly, but I'm not going to take that to a dark place. Anyway, point still stands. You can learn a lot from both types of education. You just have to recognize that in the moment, it may not be the best to challenge one or the other. Don't make the free spirit become more rigid just for you, and don't make the rigid militaristic person all of a sudden just let loose out of nowhere. Neither of those changes in the immediate moment are going to be beneficial.
No, it doesn't really work out for the students. So Magneto eventually returns to his evil ways after the world refuses to accept his reformation. They don't really acknowledge him as having changed, and they're still continuing to say, yeah, but you did X, Y, and Z. And he says, well, if I'm going to be viewed as a villain, I might as well embrace it. That's sort of how it goes. There's a whole TV Tropes page on it, but I'm not going to get into that. Since then, Magneto has continued to fight for domination over mankind, but he will ally with the X-Men if he feels that they're doing what is best for mutant kind. And that is something that has been fairly consistent throughout his history, that Magneto's primary concern is the survival of the mutant race, and he will do whatever he feels necessary to ensure that, even if it means the subjugation of mankind. It's almost as though I don't want to subjugate them, but they have all the power and we are homo superior, and therefore we should be in charge and take the power away from these lesser beings.
Absolutely. And when it comes to forming those kinds of temporary alliances, it definitely falls under that old phrase, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So kudos to him for sticking it out in the long run, despite what I think, if you objectively look at how he wants to control situations and how he puts people in certain categories, he's an incredible hypocrite, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, so let's dive right into the issues. And the first thing, and I mentioned this in the beginning, Magneto's hatred and distrust of mankind stems from his suffering through the Holocaust. And would you classify this as PTSD?
It potentially could be. He doesn't automatically have the types of reactions that would lead me to think he has active PTSD. He may have developed those soon after the things that he witnessed, but he's learned to temper them. I will say that the intense anger that he demonstrates over and over again about the circumstances that he has to deal with on a daily basis would qualify in that realm. But most importantly, I think, unfortunately, he took the wrong lessons from the circumstances. He actually has bought into a lot of the things that he, quote unquote, is fighting against. Doc, that sounds very convoluted. What on earth are you getting at? Well, the regime that was responsible for many of the atrocities of the Holocaust were doing this based on the theme that they were automatically in the right, that they were superior to those that they were subjugating, and therefore the end justified the means. Is that exactly different when you replace Aryan race with mutant? I'm leaving that open only because I don't have to answer it. Magneto does an excellent job by using the term homo superior. That is amazing. That puts everything in perspective immediately. And the fact that he wants to put that mindset into every person that he comes into contact with makes him incredibly dangerous. He's willing to say, I've suffered at the hands of others, but because I know better, I have no problem turning the tables and making those people suffer right back. And it doesn't matter what the timeline is. After all, the Holocaust was a while ago. I'm not saying that it needs to be forgotten. Oh my goodness, no, it's incredibly important to this day. And we never want to forget what humanity has done and what humanity is capable of. But at the same time, if you carry that forward without context, which he's willing to do on a regular basis, then it catches everyone off guard. It just looks to the outsider that you are simply a madman. You do not have any ability to look at current situations for what they are and find resolutions other than destroy what has been evil in the past even when the evil that you're trying to fight doesn't exist in that form anymore. So I know there may potentially be people that say there are still Nazis that exist. Of course there are. There's always going to be small subsections of people that are not acting in the best interest of society at large. Then challenge them, but challenge them directly. Don't apply it to society as a whole. Once people start to do that, such as Magneto, you end up in a situation where you're taking your trauma and you're trying to inflict it on all of those around you. I can't see that being beneficial for anyone, period. And now, because of his abilities and because of his intelligence and his connections, he's able to put this on a grand scale. He really is able to broadcast this to multiple people, vulnerable people that are desperate, that may not have the means to follow through with what they want to do in society in a healthy way, and they're going to latch on to that. So you're taking the most negative aspects of a person's mentality, you're magnifying it, and you're unleashing it upon an unsuspecting world. That's Magneto's system, and thank goodness we don't have to deal with that when it comes to superpowers or anything like that in our lives. But there are people out there that do try and do that. So I don't want to minimize that and say that this is purely a comics-based thing. But if you have people that are individually in your lives that just look at the negatives of what have already happened to them and try to apply it to everything going forward, then yes, I would recommend you keep an eye out for it, because usually pain begets pain, suffering begets suffering. And if they're looking to inflict that on others, then you have to ask them what was inflicted on you and help them address it.
All very valid points. And I think so much of that so much of the anger and the animosity that we see in our world stems from internalized suffering that these folks are lashing out at anyone that they feel is unlike them or could potentially hurt them, because they can't conceptualize that this happened to them, but the cycle can end with them, that all they're focused on is their internal suffering rather than looking at the big picture, which is a selfish view to take. It is myopic. And I'm not saying that necessarily in a derogatory sense. I'm just pointing that out, that it is very short-sighted to say, well, I'm hurting, so therefore I have to hurt. It's the bigger person, and it's a more mature person, a more emotionally mature and emotionally evolved person that can say, I was hurt, but I don't have to hurt in return. You know, that's I forget when we were in high school, we learned about the various stages of emotional development. And that's one of the lower ones. Yep. Is the, I was hurt, so therefore I'm going to hurt. That's a child's mindset that, oh, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. Or I'm going to
right.
Multiply that out tenfold.
Yep. And unfortunately, there is no rule that says if you want to talk about specific stages or just human experience and development in general, there is no law that says you have to progress to different stages. If you're there, you may be stuck there.
Was it Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
No.
But you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, Cole.
Okay. Who?
Was it Cole or Kohlberg? I always screw that up. I apologize.
We'll look that up. We'll include it in the show notes.
I apologize, people.
Listen, this wasn't one of the things that we planned for. That just sort of came out organically. So flipping to Charles Xavier, then, Xavier's optimism that he is forever fighting for this grand unified notion that mankind and mutants can live in harmony, they can coexist peacefully, etc. Where does that come from? And I understand Charles growing up had, it depending on the version of the story, he started off as a very privileged individual, but then he had a stepfather who was very abusive. And if you look in his relationship with his stepbrother, Juggernaut, stepbrother, I was going to say, it's his stepbrother, not his half-brother. His stepbrother, the Juggernaut, they had a very abusive relationship. Charles did not exactly come from a sunny, rosy family life that one might assume would lead to, oh, well, everybody can get together and get along as long as everybody focuses on the big picture. So where does Charles's optimism stem from? Because that seems to be the biggest point of contention between him and Magneto. Neither one of them, I think, is necessarily arguing that mutants are not above mankind, but it's how they choose to interact with each other. Charles continually has the idea that we can get along if something, I don't know what that something is, but he always has that optimism. And I've never really been able to figure out exactly where it is that comes from. So, Doc, if you could speak about that for a little bit.
There are two divergent paths that can lead to an optimistic mindset. It's not as binary as I'm going to make it sound. It's much more of a continuum, as many things are. But for simplification purposes, that's what I'm going to do. You hinted at the first way, which is your experiences in life have been very positive. You had the fortunate genetic lottery where you were born in the right time, right place, right resources, and therefore things are going your way. In addition to that, you continue to get those types of experiences. You did well in school, or you were highly talented in an area. You had good relationships with people, even that aren't your family directly, and things still went well. So it just becomes this cascade building upon itself of positive reinforcement, where all of your stimuli end up leading to great results. So in that sense, it's very simple to develop an optimistic attitude, because that's almost an emotional inertia. Things will continue the way they've always been. Problem with that is it's a glass cannon. If you know anything about any type of game or system where you have a fantastic system of delivering wonderful offense, but the second that anything comes by that penetrates your incredibly underdeveloped and basically horrible defense, it's all shattered. So you can look at everything all perfect and rosy and things are going to continue that way because you have that stimulus. But the second an actual negative event happens, things fall apart. And sometimes that can lead to all of the potential emotional responses you would expect. Depression, anger, violence, a total lack of self-worth, loss of daily functioning, etc., etc. Now, I'm being dramatic in describing this in such a short period of time. It can be over a longer period, of course, but that pathway is very fragile. What Xavier seems to demonstrate is the other path that I'm going to talk about, that is not dependent on the actual events that have happened to you, but the reaction that you've developed and the system that you've developed to respond to a stimulus, no matter what it is or what it causes. In other words, I could take someone like Xavier, the way he's developed this, and say, this is the worst possible situation we could be in. The world is a bad place. Many people are acting in the worst interest of others. They will continue to do so for the foreseeable future, and they will continue to act against you and your wishes, no matter what they be. Fine. I'm sorry, I know I'm supposed to say more about what the rebuttal is to that. It's not a rebuttal. It's an acceptance of that being the situation as it is. But the motivation is to do what's next. What is the way to progress? If it is to make something slightly less worse than it is, then that is the logical step. It's no different than the old saying, how do you eat an entire elephant?
One bite at a time.
Exactly.
How do you run a marathon? One step at a time.
There is no indication that things are going to automatically take the same path. You do have the opportunity to make incremental changes. And those incremental changes may be temporary, but that doesn't mean that they can't happen. And that doesn't mean that you can't take your personal incremental step at any point. you always have the opportunity to make one action, even if it's just simply an adjustment in mentality or an adjustment in process that will allow for a slight change to any situation. Once you accept that as a possibility, then even the worst scenario will not allow you to discontinue your process. It's a self-perpetuating machine, and it doesn't need the automatic reinforcement of positives. It simply needs reinforcement of the fact that you developed the process for yourself. I know that gets into this existential question of, well, where does that come from? How do you develop that process? He clearly wasn't automatically born with that process. And I'll admit that. I'm willing to concede that. He must have learned it from somewhere. It's not naturally inherent automatically. He may have been predisposed to it based on people in his life, his family, other friends, even people that he considers to be, at least in the moment, an enemy. Working with someone as intelligent and driven and motivated as Magneto, even when he didn't know he was a mutant, can be a great example of that. You can't tell me he wasn't focused. Having someone in your family that despises you and ends up getting a magical item that gives him the power of a juggernaut, he may not be a person you want to meet in a dark alley, but doggone it, he was determined and he still continues to be so. Can't knock the hustle. My point is, he may have taken what most people would consider to be negative encounters with people that were close to him and may use that as further motivation to indicate they may not be doing it the way that I would, but that gives me the opportunity to do it the way I want to for myself and expand that to others and give them the opportunity to show what they can do in their own way and in a way that positively impacts those around them. Kind of pay it forward. And as long as you continue with that mindset, it's not dependent on whether or not people actually do that. It just leaves the possibility, almost in a Buddhist fashion, where you recognize that the state you're in is okay. It's fine to be in a miserable condition. It's fine to be in a situation where people are throwing hate at you, because you will continue with that next step and see where it leads you. It doesn't have to change the world all at once. It doesn't even have to change your world in the moment. But you give yourself the perpetual chance. If the world has gone to crap, then cultivate your garden. Or, more colloquially, life hands you lemons, make lemonade. Whichever way you want to look at that, I would prefer people be willing to accept the reality of how things are and make those gradual changes than to pretend that things are incredibly well no matter what, and the next thing that comes along that challenges that view makes it all fall apart.
That is why I wear my bracelet that says it is what it is, because it's that very notion of reminding myself that whatever situation I'm in, whatever happens, I can't control that. All I can control is my reaction to that external stimuli, and I can still choose to have a positive reaction. Something horrible can happen to me, and it's about going with the flow and always being able to react, because ultimately, I mean, again, I don't want to get too existential, but all we can control in this life is our reaction to external stimuli. And I have chosen that I will always take the greatest, most possible positive step that I can in a situation. It's not 100% effective. I am not indicating whatsoever that it's perfect and that I always do the right thing all the time, but I try and I'm cognizant of it. And if I don't, at least for me personally, I will feel guilty, and then I will say, okay, next time this comes around, or can I fix it? Or what can I do next time to try better, to do better? If you know better, do better. And that's basically how I operate.
And I also want to clarify the term optimism. The fact that you can look for a continued better outcome than what is currently present does not mean an absence of what we would consider to be strong negative emotions. Optimists still cry. Optimists still feel pain.
Absolutely.
Optimists still feel anger.
Yep.
It's not eliminating those things. I want to make that clear because sometimes when people hear the term optimism, they're thinking of someone who smiles constantly and they never seem to be down.
A chronic grinner.
Yeah. That's not what I'm...
Everything is wonderful all the time. I am so happy. Everything is good.
This is one of the rare times where I think even the audience that's listening to this can see your face and get that view. And we've all met someone who's going through that and they know that it's fake. I hope people understand that's not what I'm referencing when I talk about optimism. As a matter of fact, an optimist can look more like Marcus Aurelius or Seneca the Younger, people that were considered Stoics, who rarely smiled, according to most of the literature that we have. But they still were, quote unquote, optimists because their point is no matter what the situation is, do what you can for you and do what you can for the small parts that you might be able to control and continue from there however you need to adjust. So just to keep that in mind.
Yeah, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good is I think, a nice summary of that. So now here's the next question that we have. Why is it that now Magneto and Charles, obviously, again, diametrically opposed, they have very different viewpoints, yet Magneto still continues to defend Charles, even though Charles stands opposed to him. It is never personal. And despite those strong idealistic opposing views, Magneto still feels a personal connection with Charles. And I find that to be endearing, and I find that to be refreshing. And it's interesting, though, to note that as negatively and as angry as Magneto can be, that he still holds a soft place in his heart for Charles.
This one comes down to the human, quote unquote, flaws that we all have. No matter how much Magneto wants things done in a utilitarian way for his own benefit, he likes having a friend. He doesn't want to be lonely. He wants to have the types of interactions that don't generate more anger or animosity, if possible. But he wants it on his terms and on his level. Clearly, his expectations are higher than most. Charles clearly meets most of those expectations. And from a psychological standpoint, I think it says plenty in terms of what his true priorities are, that if he had to make a list of the characteristics, almost like a blind date, what would he want in a confidant? Let's see. Okay. Looks, it doesn't matter. Must have mutant abilities. Okay, check. Must be incredibly powerful with those abilities. Okay, got it. Must clearly demonstrate a high level of intelligence. Okay, yeah, don't want to hang around with people with low IQ. Must want domination of all mankind. Somehow that doesn't quite make the list. When you think about it, why would he even have a conversation with him? He knows that if he says he wants to dominate mankind, he's going to automatically have Charles against him. And he doesn't care. I mean, he cares because that's part of his goals in the long run, but not his personal belonging. He still wants to maintain that relationship out of context with everything else. He's willing to keep that silo. He's making an exception to his own hard, fast rule. The problem with that is, if he could keep that absolutely hidden from everyone, he would. He just happened to pick someone like Charles, who also is a prominent figure. This is almost, I almost hesitate to use this, but it's the truth. It's sometimes what people do when they may have a certain lifestyle that they love. They're like in secret. Either they have some sort of fetish or they have some hobby that they don't want people to know about. And they will maintain one or two people who are also into that hobby and a few other things that they like, and they will be their ultimate partner, confidant, whatever. But heaven forbid that ever makes it to the light of day. They will disavow all knowledge of it. They may even go so far as to eliminate that person from their lives if it ever got out. But as long as they can hold on to that secret, they'll do it in perpetuity. Meanwhile, their public appearance has nothing to do with that and may be completely opposed to it. But they're willing to live pretty much a double life for the sake of holding on to that one piece that, quote unquote, completes them. I'm sorry to be melodramatic about it, but it's that strong emotional attachment to individuals that adds to our humanity. And we, unfortunately, or fortunately, because I like it, can't shut it off. Magneto likes to ignore it, but he can't. And not to mention, as with so many other things in life, it's random chance. You're telling me that people with that type of background doing that type of what most would consider humanitarian work, that's how they meet? How many people are doing that at any given time? Not that many. At least from a global scale, there are billions of people in the world, right? So they have similar interests. They didn't know they were mutants, but still, I'm sure they may have recognized that something was unique about that person. And I do mean that platonically. It doesn't have to be sexual or intimate in that way. But it still stands. When you make those types of connections, we want to hold on to them. So I don't find it shocking that they keep this friendship going. And I am going to call it a friendship. Or maybe some people would call it frenemies, whatever. What I find shocking about it is he's willing to do it in such a public way, with such a public figure, and no one bats an eye about it other than saying, well, that's just those two. That's what they do. Because their prominence creates such an impact with all the people around them, which, yeah, in the comics did lead to some pretty cool alternative storylines and abuses of power. And my goodness, I don't think I like X-Men as much as our listeners do in total. We learned that from the Cyclops episode. But I love Magneto for how hard he fights for what he wants. And he's not afraid to be the biggest hypocrite in the world for it. As a matter of fact, he's more like, yeah, I'm a hypocrite. So what? You want to try me? Kudos to him.
Interesting. Okay, because I was going to say that, and that comes up a lot, whether it's the comics or the movies, that the notion that Magneto is the hypocrite, and we're going to get into that a little bit later on. But the notion that, well, what makes you, as we were saying earlier, what makes you any different than the Nazis that you're fighting against from a conceptual standpoint? So I think that's a very interesting thing. And the last thing that I want to mention, and this is not really necessarily relevant to their relationship per se, but it comes up a lot in the discussion around their relationship, that the dynamic between Charles and Magneto is often referred to the difference between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, that Xavier is referred to as the Martin Luther King and Magneto is the Malcolm X of the group. And of course, I recognize my full privilege is saying this as a white man, that I'm speaking about two of the biggest African-American leaders of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. But from my perspective, and again, my perspective as a white man, I don't want to say chafed at that analogy, but I think, and I'm being very careful as to how I choose my words because of the subjects that I'm speaking about, particularly Dr. King. And I think both of them did amazing things for mankind. But Dr. King has been deified after the assassination. At the time, prior to his assassination, Martin Luther King was considered one of the most dangerous people in America. And if you read his, letters from the Birmingham jail and so on and so forth, yes, he publicly spoke about we need nonviolence, and he certainly was not advocating the violent protests, whereas Malcolm X tends to be publicly considered to be more militant. But the notion that Martin Luther King was a soft individual, I don't see that in reality at all. Certainly from a contemporary review of things, Martin Luther King was considered very dangerous. You had COINTELPRO, you had the FBI looking into him. J. Edgar Hoover was very, very interested in what Martin Luther King was doing. So I think this notion that we say now, oh, well, Charles Xavier is like Martin Luther King, the peaceful, nonviolent, et cetera, and Magneto is the harsh, militant Malcolm X one. Malcolm X wasn't the bad guy of the two, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was not the soft pacifist that I think that white people like to think that he is because it helps the white narrative. I think that's why we have Dr. Martin Luther King Day. And again, I'm not, please do not misconstrue this. I'm not taking anything off of Dr. King. He was an amazing human being and he did wonderful things. My point is that white people have cleaned up the image of what Dr. King fought for, so much so that I would almost argue that it takes away the notion that he was still fighting for the equality. He still wanted very many of the same things that Malcolm X wanted. They may have spoken about it in a little different ways, but they both were very, very similar in what their ultimate end goal was. It's just Malcolm was willing to stand up and say, we will fight you if need be because you're not going to give this to us. Whereas Martin Luther King said, well, let's try talking about it first. And therefore, white people said, well, your view doesn't challenge our supremacy nearly as much, so you're okay. Whereas Malcolm X is the evil militant. And I see so much of that happening with the Xavier and Magneto comparison. And I'm going to stop talking now and let you take over because I see you sitting here and you're contemplating. And
okay,
white man is going to shut up now.
First of all, I am not looking to put you in your place or anything when it comes to a white, black narrative of anything related to this. I just want to point out that the difference between how society views the Martin Luther King and Malcolm X comparison, along with Charles and Magneto, is Malcolm and Martin knew what people thought of them and used it as a platform. In the case of Charles and Magneto, I'm not so sure that they recognize they're on common ground and looking to expound upon it against those who have their own separate view. I think Magneto really is trying to crush that. He wants to have this opposition at all times. It makes it simpler for him. So what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to stay within the context of the characters themselves, mainly because this type of political and socio-cultural discussion goes way beyond you and me, or even the people that created these characters specifically, or the families or the people that actually knew the gentleman that we're speaking of in history, because we know that nobody is perfect. And we know, for example, that there were times before there was an official Martin Luther King Day that people talked about his adultery. And there were times that other aspects of what the Nation of Islam was doing was automatically foisted upon Malcolm X, and that someone like Muhammad Ali did not support someone like Malcolm X for going against Elijah Muhammad when Malcolm X himself had pointed out that there were many inconsistencies with what they were doing. So I feel like there are just so many points that end up scattered in all of this that I can't even do a decent job summarizing it in a compare and contrast with these two things.
Oh, I agree. We could definitely do an entire episode just on the comparison of that aspect alone. That is worthy of academic discussion.
Right. But I will touch specifically on this. When you're willing to challenge the status quo in society and you're willing to be a public figure and speak out against what you consider to be an injustice, there are only really going to be two responses to it if you have any real influence, and that is acceptance or denial. What do you do with the acceptance? What do you do with the denial? I'm just going to go with each person, the two historical people and the two characters. Martin Luther King enjoyed the acceptance, embraced the acceptance, was willing to give positive and rousing speeches about the acceptance. He was willing to write about the denial, point out that he was willing to accept anyone that at some point that was in denial, be willing to change their mind at all times, never closed his doors off to them, but pointed out that he was disappointed. You hit it perfectly, I think, with Malcolm X, in that although he acknowledged that there were people that accepted him, he would hope that 100% of Black America and also anyone of Islamic faith would be accepting of him. And that made him more comfortable in his own skin about the situation, because he had some anxiety about some other things. I'm not going to get into that. Read that on your own for historical purposes. The denial part, he had intense anger about, because he could not see how anybody could question why someone would need to challenge this. And he was not as accepting of people that remained in denial, and was willing to say, you do you, but don't come to me. And more importantly, if you had a track record of that, it wasn't much of a negotiation. Not to the point of saying that he was willing to be violent, but saying if he gets attacked, or if anyone was willing to attack, then my goodness, you better fight back. You have to stand your ground, no question about it. Charles, in a way, wanted to do things on the down low with the way he's handled everything. The Xavier School, the X-Men, all of it. In theory, if he could do all of that in anonymity and have a series of society of mutants that simply blended in and didn't have to have these confrontations, he'd be fine with it. But he was willing to get the job done by sending out people that were skilled in what they had to do to keep the peace. He actually had that weapon. Martin Luther King didn't have that kind of weapon. His weapon was what we call conscientious objection, which people get wrong all the time, meaning, yes, you're going to have consequences. You're going to be put in jail. It doesn't mean that he wanted to be in jail. It meant, I'm going to challenge the fact that this is a ridiculous law, and I'm willing to accept the consequences and have it shown to people so that they know just how ridiculous it is. So Charles doesn't go that route. There were no mutant sit-ins. So it's hard to really match that up from that standpoint. And when it came to deniers, there was a lot of similarities between him and King. He was always willing to discuss it. He was always looking for another way, but he had something, at least from a comic book standpoint, that nobody else had. He can literally change minds. Didn't abuse it, but always had it in his back pocket, and people knew it. So that automatically changes the whole system of power. Just something to consider, especially when he was in full Cerebro mode, like has everything at his will. So just the fact that you have that almost creates a Cold War effect. Nothing in the world matches that, in my opinion. Then you get Magneto. He takes it to the extreme. If you are with him, oh my goodness, are you ever with him? You would have to make the conscious choice to be a fighter, because that's what was expected of you. He didn't mince words about it. He wanted people to do that. So if you accepted that, great. You knew that coming in. It was meant to be antagonistic. So with deniers, well, that's clear. Eliminate them. That's the point. Or if they capitulate, well, let them be lesser human beings as long as they know it. But they're going to be down. They'll never get the same level. None of the other people that we're talking about thought of it that way. At least not from the evidence that I'm aware of. Not consistently. So he's in his own plane with that. Which you would think is exactly why he's the outlier. All of the other people that I mentioned, the characters and the historical figures, their point is we're all human. If we're not starting with the idea that we're all sentient beings that have a certain level of respect and expectation that we're going to be in this together, then it all falls apart. Magneto doesn't have that. That's where he really starts to veer off. The rest of them were dealing with that basic premise. He's not. So more power to you if you really want to continue with that type of analogy and whatnot. I'm just saying it falls apart at many levels. I tried to do my best to point out that there is a reason why that comparison is made. So I need to validate the point that it's fair to bring it up, but it's not the be all end all. And more importantly, I can't help it because this is too good an opportunity. Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story. To the victor go the spoils. Thankfully, humanity, I feel, won when I'm able to sit across from you like this, despite my appearance, and have no repercussions negative about that. I think that's wonderful. And because we won, we want to put the best story forward. I can't knock people for doing that. But thankfully, there are plenty of people that are willing to forgive, but based on the atrocities in many different parts of humanity, let's be honest, we'll never forget.
Wow. Very powerful stuff. I did not see that coming, but I'm incredibly grateful that we were able to have this discussion. And that's what I love about this show is we get moments like that where we can have these discussions, and that is the beauty of comic books. And also that's another reason why we love doing this podcast, is because we can have these deep, hard-hitting, philosophical, human moments while talking about something as potentially basic and simplistic as comic books. But it's never just comic books. There's usually a deeper meaning behind it, and it gives rise to discussions like this. So thank you very much, Doc, for that. We're going to take a short break because we're going to start doing ad fills in our episode. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to discuss treatment.
Hey, Ray.
Yes, Connor?
What's black and white and red all over?
A newspaper?
Not even close.
Sunburnt zebra?
What are you doing, Ray? Not even close.
Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. A weekly podcast coming to you from the High Priest of Khonshu. Available on all good podcast catchers.
And we're back. So now moving into the treatment portion, as we always do, we start with the in-universe. And Doc, I know in talking prior to this, you had an interesting suggestion or thoughts. See, now I'm going to say this because this is a different styled episode, because it's about the relationship. I don't know what the treatment would be other than just having them hash it out. But by the nature of the difference of their viewpoints, I'm not really sure where you could find compromise.
Okay.
So at any case, I'll leave this up to you to talk about it.
Okay. This is couples therapy. And I know for some people there are some snickers right now. He's saying they're gay. I'm homophobic. No, that's not what I mean. What I'm referring to is any relationship has a certain construct to it, and it's not always perfectly balanced evenly. When there is a conflict, it's like a tug of war. One person is on one end of the rope, and the other person is on the other end of the rope. And the way they're viewing the situation is, I have to pull as hard as I can on my end to get the other person to fall over and I win. The beauty of interpersonal therapy and relationship therapy is I get to break that model. I get to tell people, you both can pull the same end of the rope. To which the common reaction is, well, then what's on the other end? And I point out that's exactly what we need to figure out. Because usually the conflict, if it's truly a relationship that the people want to continue, is not exactly the other person. It may be behaviors that the other person has done. It may be an outcome that wasn't a positive result for both people. But whatever it is, we need to take it out of the idea that the other person is the enemy. In a way, they've already gotten past that a few times, which is why they make these temporary alliances. And we see how we just discussed Magneto bringing Charles into the fold sometimes just for the sake of having a friend. So it's already there, but especially in universe, I'm thinking we need to boost that somehow. And I'm going to be honest, I don't have a direct answer for this, but if there is an area where they both have had a positive experience together, I think that would be powerful in bridging the initial gap so that they could have a discussion without it automatically being such a contentious environment. To be honest, it's very rare.
So bring them to a happy place.
Yeah, it's very rare for people to be in a situation where they have a general gestalt of positive experiences with other people and then turn it into a negative experience. Or at least it's less likely with someone directly there to guide them through whatever it is that they're talking about. And I would do that pretty carefully because this isn't just for them. This is for the people that work with them. And I'm not saying that just in like a coworker space. I'm saying pretty much the fate of mankind depends on this relationship lasting. Or, unfortunately, when relationships don't last, coming to a conclusion that allows for a dissolution that won't destroy the planet. But that's not going to be much different than out-of-universe treatment, so I'm going to save the details on that. But just thinking off the top of my head, they've had experiences, I was going to say Savage Land, but see, the problem is, although there were points where they relied on survival for each other and they lived through it, I wouldn't call that a positive experience. So I don't know if I could rely on that.
I was then going to say Genosha, but I'm not really sure that's a positive experience.
Exactly.
Either.
So I may be truly living in a fantasy world if I think that this can happen. But if there were some way to do that, that would be my first step. There's another one that I think would be incredibly symbolic that I would try through the techniques I'll talk about out of universe, where it would be the ultimate symbol that this can work. And I think you know what I'm going to reference here if I give you some hints. What is iconic about Magneto when you picture him in your head?
His helmet.
Bingo. And we know why he wears it.
To prevent Xavier from getting into his head.
Yeah. Now, what happens if he were to take that off and Xavier doesn't do anything? How powerful is that? Just that moment. Even if it were just a moment, take it off, put it back on, and then almost through a systematic desensitization, take it off longer next session. Eventually getting to take it off the entire session. To eventually, don't wear the damn helmet, dude.
Are you saying it's his security blanket?
Maybe. It has a practical purpose, not denying that. And there may be other mutants with similar abilities that he may not be able to trust. I get that too. But once again, I'm talking about these two specific characters. You get that type of bond, I think ultimately they'll get where they need to go. And I'm going to talk about that specifically with the outer universe treatment.
Okay. Well, then let's move to the out of universe treatment then.
Okay.
I don't know where you would begin to draw the corollary for real life, but I'll leave that to you because you're the expert and I'm not.
What I'm going to do is give an example of a couple, and yes, this is a married couple, that in theory are diametrically opposed.
James Carville and Mary Matalin?
You are the man. That is perfect. That's exactly what I was thinking about. Because the point is, there's a difference between being idealistic about things and being practical about things. And finding the common ground isn't as difficult as these two characters make it seem. Do you want what's best for society? Do you truly want that? If you do, then we start at that base level. From there, you just keep building one small point at a time, and careful to avoid the glass cannon that I mentioned earlier about building optimism. But the point is, you want to rack up some of those real cheap wins. So in other words, okay, we've established you want a positive for society. Do you want more people to be in a better place than they are today? Great. All right, let's build on that. Do you think that the majority of the world is evil? That might actually be a big disparaging point for these two if we're talking about out of universe. But I don't think most people, if they're in a positive space with their relationship, really think that way. If they do, then we may have to cut things off because that person is going to need a little more individual therapy before even jumping into a interpersonal session. But if we can get past that hurdle, then the next hurdle is there anything right now between you two that is different about your current goals? And you have the person on one side write down what their goals are. You have the other person write down what their goals are specifically for that relationship. If there are mismatches, then you know it ahead of time. And then the question becomes, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for this relationship to grow, or it's an opportunity for this relationship to reach its maturity and find alternative paths. Always leave the door open for the idea that they may not come to a resolution together, because that's just the reality of life. But if they continue to point out that they want to have a relationship together and be positive about it as friends, then you continue to have that optimism that we mentioned before. Not because things are great, but because you can always take the next step. An example would be, let's say, it could be as mundane as, well, they don't do chores the way I want them to. Okay. Is that a matter of the power related to the chores? Is that a matter of personal responsibility? Is that a matter of objectively things are not done and someone needs to do them? Whatever it is.
Yeah, are they doing the chores first? That you build from that.
Right.
I would think anyway, at least
No,
as a married man, I would think, are they doing the chores? Because if that's the case, then it's just a matter of tweaking. If they're not even doing the chores or they don't want to or whatever, then you delve deeper.
Right. Exactly. So it's just taking one base point at a time. And it's not a matter of, I realize I'm saying points, but you're not keeping score. I know we've mentioned this in other episodes, but it's not a scorecard. It's simply, these are things that need to be addressed together. And how do we do it? What is the next practical thing? With the expectation that there is going to be a slight change within, let's say, if we're doing this weekly, what's the one thing that you want change next week for both of you? If, let's say, I'll even make it lopsided. Let's say it's clear this one person is just not doing anything. This one person is doing everything. Then what is the one change that you want to see this person do? And what is the one thing that the person that's doing everything, what is the one thing that you're willing to let go and not have a reaction to? Because what happens is the resentment of an imbalance starts to grow, even if the person is doing one thing, because the expectation is, well, now it should be equal, because if I see you do one thing, I know you can do a lot more. No.
I feel personally attacked by this relatable content.
I swear to you.
I know it's a joke. No, I'm kidding. But
But
Well, 95% joking.
it's true. It's true for all of us. I'm not saying anything out of school. Like that's true for everyone, right? And I think everyone listening to this episode directly relates to this. Otherwise, why would you be listening to any of this at all? But the point still stands. Don't keep score. If you're willing to make an improvement on one end, then you have to acknowledge that the person is making a slight improvement and continue to encourage it. In other words, if that other person does that one thing just that one time and then goes back to doing nothing, acknowledging, saying, it's impressive that you did that once. I wonder if I could see that again. I might someday, because I know it's in there. Oh well. And almost downplaying it. That can be very powerful for a person that doesn't have a motivation otherwise.
That sounds passive-aggressive AF, I'm just saying.
Yes, it is. No, see, that's the thing. We're still humans.
So you can do the dishes. You just choose not like that's
Well, I'm saying that honestly, this is where words matter. The way that you can phrase something in relationships can make all the difference.
Oh, so your legs aren't broken. So you can get off the couch then. Okay. Oh, okay.
You don't have to be sarcastic with it.
I'm sorry. I'm what can I say? I'm from Jersey. I speak sarcasm fluently.
I know. And to your credit, it's not as if you haven't heard it from me. What I'm getting at with all of this is that changing it from this outside person is doing these things and that's the problem, it becomes my reaction to the things that are going on are causing me distress. Perhaps there are ways I can address that feeling.
Yes.
To go back to that internal locus of control that we were mentioning before, that it is what it is, as you said. Turning it that way allows for a lot more growth than just simply keeping the scorecard. You do this, you do this. Anybody can be a referee about that. That's not what therapy is. Therapy is letting the people themselves be their own referees. And you are giving the critique of how they're able to navigate everything. In other words, they're still the drivers. You might be the tour guide that's over their shoulder, pointing out that there are some interesting places that they still need to go.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to see how all this works because we're going to get Charles Xavier and Magneto in group therapy on Dr. Issues' couch.
Oh, no. Hello, gentlemen. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hello, Dr. Issues. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. This entire meeting is a farce.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Mr. Lencher.
My name is Magneto, and if you value your life, human, you would do well to remember that. Eric, please. He means well. I suppose you've read his mind, so you speak of his intentions as though you already know them. I have not read his mind, although I obviously can. He's a being with free will who poses no immediate threat, so I have not invaded his privacy.
Oh, thank you, Professor. I appreciate that.
You appreciate it because if he did, he'd discover your hidden mistrust, if not hatred, of mutants. Might I remind you that he has worked with several mutants before us with no incidents. Scott, Logan, Jamie, even David. He can be trusted. I will not object further, but that does not equate with trust.
I can work with that. So let's get right to the point. You two have a long storied history together. You've often been on diametrically opposed sides of an issue, yet you're here willing to hash things out. I commend you both for this. So my first question to you is, why, in spite of all that history, are you still fighting to preserve this relationship? I ask this question without judgment. I'm really trying to know you better and get to the root of the situation.
Charles continues to fight because he thinks he can persuade me that mankind isn't a threat to mutants. His eternal optimism has been disproved repeatedly, yet he clings to it like a drowning man to a life raft. Humans have demonstrated time and again they can take a better path, if only they are shown one. You've seen it yourself, old friend. We've worked with humans countless times. Always in furtherance of the mutant agenda. Everything I do is for the benefit of mutants everywhere.
If I may, I think this is a good opportunity to clear some things up. You seem to have different ideas about what that agenda entails. Magneto, you seem to have a hardline opinion of the agenda, while Charles is a bit more fluid. I think that nature alone is creating conflict.
Eric refuses to acknowledge that his insistence on a fight is a self-serving prophecy. He always gets a battle because he can't stop seeking one. He's so short-sighted he's missing the forest for the trees. And Charles is so blinded by his need for harmony that he can't see when someone is going to betray him. For all his ability to read minds, he is horrible at reading humanity. Mutants are superior, and I don't see why we should be forced to be subservient to lesser beings.
Can I ask a question?
That depends. Is it an intelligent one?
Do you believe Inhumans are superior to humans?
What?
What are your thoughts on Inhumans? Where do they rank on your scale compared to humans and mutants?
Inhumans tried to wipe us from the planet. That was a messy affair.
Point well taken, but my argument is that they're superior to humans, are they not? They have abilities, they often can't control them initially, the transformation can be violent, they end up shunned from humanity. I mean, that's really similar to how you describe mutant kind, is it not?
The good doctor makes a valid argument. They still tried to kill us.
Well, what about changelings? Where do they stand compared to other mutants? What about superhumans that aren't mutants? Is Captain America separate? Bruce Banner? Spider-Man? I mean, do they get exemption from those with no abilities? What's the pecking order? And who determines it? What if there are aliens who display abilities vastly superior to mutants, and they come to Earth looking to subjugate or eradicate lesser beings? Then would you step aside then because they're above you?
Well, Eric, we're waiting for an answer. I'm not one of them, so I can't speak for anyone other than mutants.
Well, who decided you could speak for the mutants? I'm not saying that's
one more outburst like that, Doctor, and you'll find yourself without the ability to speak for yourself or anyone. That's enough, Eric. He's trying to help us resolve the situation. Is he, Charles? Or is he trying to keep us divided against each other so he can maintain control?
I'm not sure I ever had control of this.
Eric, we have a history of doing incredible things when we're on the same side. That alone demonstrates to me that my stance is a valid one. And how many people have paid the price for trusting in you? Far fewer than those who trusted you. Look at all those who abandoned you and joined me. Raven, Rogue, Wanda and Pietro. Because you persuaded them, you toyed with their minds. That is a false accusation and you know it. You've never known me to meddle in the minds of others without permission or urgent cause. And defeating me doesn't constitute a sufficient emergency to bend your precious rules? A victory by that measure is no victory at all. You're a fool.
If I might...
Not silence. Now. Eric, please. At the end of the day, the survival of the planet depends on all of its creatures thriving. The best way to accomplish this is through working with the humans. Fighting them does nothing but prove all your stated fears they have correct. You've become the very thing you oppose. And suppose they turn against us. You've never known the horrors mankind can inflict. I carry the scars with me every waking moment. I thought Nazis were long ago extinguished. Yet I turn on the news and see them flourishing. You ask me to show compassion and restraint? The fact that there are still Nazis on this planet demonstrates far more control on my behalf than they deserve. I don't claim to say every human is a fine representation of their species, but we can't judge a species by its worst example. Instead, we should focus on their best examples of what they should aspire to become. Can you tell me that Captain America should be treated no better than those Nazis you speak of? There is only one Captain America. There have been thousands of Nazis. Technically, there have been several Captains America. But my point is, we shouldn't fight them on what they are. We can show them how to become better. Be the example that they need.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Martin Luther King.
Always with the King quote.
Regardless of how true that quote is, I don't believe you're as far apart as you might think. There's a lot of commonality between you two. If only you'd put down this anger and move towards reconciliation.
Telling Eric not to be angry is like emptying the ocean with a colander.
Be that as it may, I'm encouraged by this discussion. You two can continue this discussion at any time.
I'm certainly willing to maintain an open dialogue with you, Eric. I shall ponder this turn of events. As for you, Doctor, you've earned a respite from harm at the hand of mutant kind. For now.
I will simply say thanks for that and not press my luck any further.
Wise man.
That could have gone much worse, at least. Did you just repair my door?
I'd say that's a good first step.
Well, even if that's the only step, I'll take it.
So as you can hear, by the way, we had a Twitter poll up that was going to determine which set of voices that I would use for Charles and Eric, whether I was going to go with the movie version, which I did my best at. I know it was a less than stellar Patrick Stewart, and I apologize. I can't get his gravitas. McKellen's a little easier because he's got a little more bass to it and just his manner of speaking. So I was much more confident in my Ian McKellen impression than I was my Patrick Stewart. But the alternative was to do comics accurate versions of that, meaning an upstate New York for Charles and a German Jew for Magneto. Unfortunately, the vote ended in a tie. I kid you not. It ended in a dead tie. So
Womp womp.
we opted to go with the movie version. If we ever revisit this, and there's still plenty of material that we can use to revisit this, perhaps the next time I'll go with a more comics accurate version.
Fair enough.
So that's going to do it for this episode. Next episode, thanks to our patrons Ariel and Ruby, we are going to be covering Lex Luthor, and then the episode after that, Kilgrave. So we're going to try and time Kilgrave close to Jessica Jones. I know we tried to get this one shortly after Dark Phoenix that just came out, which I have not seen, and based on the reviews, I'm not sure I'm going to go see in the theaters.
Same here.
Yeah, I might just wait till that one comes out on FX.
And I just might not ever see it.
The completionist in me has to see it, but
Yeah, I don't have that problem.
yeah, God bless you. It's a blessing and a curse. So once again, thank you to all of our fans and our patrons. We will be live streaming all of our future recording sessions, and if you would like to get in on that, and if you'd like to learn more about some of the swag that we're going to have that we'll be announcing soon, you can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/capesonthecouch, and you can subscribe at the $1, $3, and $5 levels. $1 gets you a shout out, $3 gets you early access and the monthly downloads, the monthly blooper reel, and $5 gets you the uncensored versions of every episode, as well as you guarantee that any questions you have in advance will be answered. So we'll be in touch with Ariel and Ruby for their questions and anything that they want us to talk about with respect to Lex Luthor and Kilgrave. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. We have a Facebook page. Please join the Facebook fan group as well. So we've got some discussions going on amongst our fans about episodes. And be sure to check out my appearance on Popcorn Psychology. And I'll also be posting on social media about my appearance on Into the Night when that is officially released. And then you can email us at capesonthecouch@gmail.com. And last but not least, if you listen to us on a platform that allows you to rate and review, please like, rate, review, subscribe, do all those wonderful things, because the more people like and rate our show positively, the more people will get to hear it. Doc, anything you want to add?
I'd just like to say that as long as you're continuing to fight for a relationship, you're continuing to fight for the best in us.
Very well put. So for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.